Hey there, guys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. Stuart Bell here, business coach, founder of our Dairy Coaching and Consulting, and creator of the Leverage Advice Firm program. And welcome to another masterclass. This is your opportunity to sort of zero in on a conversation that I had with either a subject matter expert, a practitioner, an advisor who's just got a great story to tell us, or someone who's built a unique business. And we unpack how they did it and the story along the way. Now, I know last time around I promised that we were going to have a focus on technology, because you know what? Choosing the right practice tech has become sort of a bit of a challenge in itself, and getting to see behind the features. But I really wanted to share one more sort of masterclass session, which I think is really useful, because it's a topic that I think most businesses, particularly given all that's gone on in our industry in the last 3 to 5 years, I think it's really, really key. Today I want to share with you a conversation I had with Daryl La'Brooy of Hillross St Kilda. And this one's called Value Transition. Daryl and I know each other from a long time ago when I was part of Hillross. But we only started to get the opportunity to work together, I think about maybe just under 2 years ago. And I've just had such a great time working with Daryl and Kirsten and the whole team at Hillross, because first of all, the way they do advice, the advice they give, just adds significant value. And what you're going to hear today from Daryl is he has this ability to just explain at the drop of a hat the journey that a client's been on, and most importantly, the value that advice has added to that client over time. And it's really compelling to listen to. But in addition, one of the things when I started working with Daryl is we realized very quickly that he was running a business where not only was the advice great, but in many cases, the way that it was priced wasn't really working. And sometimes this can be one of the biggest challenges, particularly right now, where legislation's kind of driven up costs and a whole bunch of other things. Licensing costs have increased, which is unfortunately, that it's been on a path where when costs increase, and if you don't sort of align your pricing to match that, what generally happens is you end up paying for it with, giving back your time and working longer and longer hours. And this was exactly the situation. But thankfully, after we get the opportunity to sit down and go through the whole pricing journey, Daryl, as you'll hear from this story, his business is in a very different place. So I wanted to share this today because for many of you who maybe have, kind of held a position when it comes to your pricing, but have seen your costs go up and it's putting more of a squeeze, you're finding capacity is crushed, you're working longer hours, it's harder to keep track of things. I think this story about how Daryl took what he was already good at, which is being very, very clear about the value he was able to add, combined it with an analysis of his costs, and not just cost to serve. I'm going to go in more detail here, but most importantly, he was able to engineer a financial result where we increased his profitability of your business by 6 figures. And as a result, he was able to put the business on a more sustainable footing. So I'm going to hand over to Daryl now, and let's jump into the value transition. I first met Daryl many, many years ago in a different life when I was employed at Hillross. Now, Hillross back in those days, it was a very different beast. It was a great place to work. It was very much separate from AMP. We used to joke that AMP was kind of like King Kong, yeah. And as long as we, as the blonde character, kept feeding King Kong bananas, we'd be fine. But I met a lot of advisors back in the time, really good ones. But Daryl always stuck out at me as someone who is particularly good at what he does. And he's the author of a book. He is a voracious learner. He's also very passionate about advice, and he runs a really great business in Hillross St Kilda. Great name, by the way. And when he sort of reached out and we had a conversation about what he wanted to do and where he wanted to go, do you know sometimes you might experience this with clients, you just have this instant, I really want to work with this person. And sort of everything that's happened since then has kind of just made me more and more excited. And in particular, the thing we're going to talk about today is when we sat down and sort of talked about where the business was and analysed, it became clear that one of the things we needed to do, almost the first thing we need to do is really get on the right track with pricing. And the interesting thing is before we even finished doing the model, Daryl and Kirsten and Stephen and the team had kind of just, they'd gone off and they'd implemented it. And since then, it's just been more and more. So what I want to do is I want to give you the opportunity to learn from someone who has really knows what they're doing, has done this really, really well, but more than that, has more. I think has more exposure to really smart people, and has integrated them. So everything he's doing is just a combination of that. He's got so much value to offer, so much to give. So let's just jump into this and get this show on the road. Daryl, are you there? Beautiful stuff. How are you? Let's stop that sharing.
Yeah, pretty well, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah. You had a good start to the morning.
Yes, always.
Now you're pretty active, aren't you? What's your morning routine look like?
The morning routine's getting up and getting to work. I do all my activity at lunchtime and after work.
Yeah, some people are morning people. Yeah. I used to be an evening person, but I've kind of moved into morning. How are you? I mean, I know you've sort of, like all of us, you've had a lot of your plans for the year kind of condensed down. Have you got a big Christmas planned ahead?
Having some time off before a big 22.
Man, I think everybody should take a big, long, extended break over Christmas, but I know I'm needing it. Hey, man, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about this today. I know we were talking about this, and I was just like, there's so many things we could talk about, because, I mean, the writing the book, the experiences you've had sort of through MDRT. I mean, you've built a great business down there. There's so much we can talk about, but I really wanted to dive into this value in this transition, and that superpower you have of literally, you can mention the client's name and you go, okay, this is where they started, this is what we did for them, and this is where they are. It's impressive. For those of you that maybe haven't met you, or God forbid haven't heard you, can you give us the bit of the 5-minute background of who you are, what your business does, who you help, that sort of stuff?
I joined the financial planning world back in the late 1990s. Fortunate enough to join Retire Invest back then. Retire Invest were a leader in actually offering service packages to clients, despite the fact that back then it was pretty much a commission model, a product selling model, but they had this ongoing servicing, which really has been, I guess, the backbone of the entire business in the 20 odd years that I've been doing it. And when all the new regulations came in and you had to demonstrate you were servicing and adding value to clients, that ongoing care package at Retire Invest actually made us offer clients and then work towards for clients, really held us in good stead during initially FSR, then FOFA, and now, of course, Royal Commission. So we were always focused on service delivery and making sure that we help people with Centrelink and help people with their investments and whatever, rather than the model that was predominant at the time, which was get as many people through the door as possible, sign them up, and then move on to the next person. And they were the firms that were really doing a lot of revenue, because it was, a volume-based operation. We didn't really head down that path necessarily. It was more about relationships, not knowing that, 20 years down the track, the relationships we embedded at the time would really serve us in spades, meaning it got us through the Royal Commission. And when we had to increase prices, clients could actually see the value we delivered right through the journey and did not have any problems with giving us an increase of the fees we were sort of looking for to make our servicing viable for them.
So Retire Invest is really interesting, because they were probably one of the first licensees to really have a crack at owning a brand in the space. What was your take on that? How successful was it? How easy was it, particularly at the beginning, it's obviously it's a retirement proposition. What was it like to be on the inside of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how the brand attracted a certain type of person to the organisation. So pre-retirees and retirees were pretty much drawn to the brand. And if you think about it, back then when there was less money than there is now, the retirees and pre-retirees were the ones that actually had the fairly large amounts of money to invest. So it was a brilliant strategy from that point of view. We didn't have too many accumulators coming in. The brand didn't attract accumulators, and in fact, they tried to extend the brand by bringing in another offering called Future Wealth,
Okay.
But of course, the money from the advice perspective, because we were paid on trailing commissions, were really in the pre-retiree and retiree end of the market.
So I'm really keen to go into a bit of the journey and sort of where it's developed. But where you're at now in terms of the target market you work with, and the client, how far away is it from where you started?
I've added one area to the target market, and essentially the pre-retiree, retiree end of the market has continued in my career. But we've seen an opportunity in the successful business owner market, people running successful businesses where they're dealing with complexity. The accountants and the lawyers are doing certain pieces of the work, but they've got superannuation needs, they've got investment needs, they've got surplus cash coming in that has to be looked after. And hence, of course, me launching my book back in 2013 and launching a separate brand. Funnily enough, of course, the compliance work in the interim and the fact that we're getting a lot of referrals into the pre-retiree and retiree into the market has meant that I haven't done as much work in the small business space as I would have wanted to. But that's not a bad problem to have.
Remind me, was it the Bulletproof Business? Was that the name of the book?
Business Ownership Bulletproofed.
That's right, Business Ownership Bulletproof. Actually, it's available on Kogan, would you believe? I was
like, Amazon is where I'm making all my sales, but I'm not making a lot of money selling the book. It's basically positioning me as a person of authority in that space and giving people who buy the book a bit of an understanding in terms of how we can add value to them.
So, I'd be keen to understand a little bit about sort of the journey you went on. You were with Retire Invest for a period of time, and that would have been was it a prescriptive business model, or was it very much up to you to build what you wanted?
Yeah, very much prescriptive. I mean, you had the service package, you had to deliver the service package. That's what people were buying, the ongoing care program. And look, I mean, that was a great base to work with. We then moved out of Retire Invest in 2005 and set up an independent license, then with hand-picked franchisees from Retire Invest.
Oh, wow.
And we had 13 offices nationally, 35 advisors at the peak. But a lot of the guys at the time were coming up for retirement, and they could see the writing on the wall after the GFC and the reforms the Labor government was going to bring in, and they decided we were going to be too small to survive, and they looked for a large merger partner. The business was tendered. About 23 licensees kicked the tires, and the 24 shareholders in the company decided that at the time, Hillross was the best fit for us.
What was that like? I mean, it's interesting because it almost feels like, you must see this, that the industry seems to go from one extreme to the other, back and forward. And we're now seeing the rise of sort of these small, I call them the small giants, small groups of business that are coming together, different brands, but they've got similar values. What was it like to have 13 offices, 30 advisors? Did it work? What didn't work?
It was fantastic because we had a great team in head office, people we trusted to run a really slick operation, and we partnered with other advisors who had the same philosophy, were people who had a clean record, and we knew that in the new world, would be reliable and didn't have any issues or problems. So we weren't looking to be a mass market offering where we'd sign up hundreds of advisors, good, bad, or indifferent. We were really particular in who we'd take on board.
Okay, and then you moved to Hillross. How did that? Was that a big change?
Massive change. I mean, look, we've been with the institution being Retire Invest, Mercantile Mutual, ING, from the time I joined to 2005. So we knew what a big organisation was like. AMP, Hillross, of course, AXA came in during our acquisition. It became the biggest in the market. I think that about 4,000 advisors back in 2011 when the AXA merger was completed. Was a much bigger beast, a lot more, prescriptive than even Retire Invest was. And we knew what we were getting into. I mean, that was the environment that we'd signed up for, and things were fine.
So obviously, from the time sort of we knew each other, Hillross was very much I wouldn't say it wasn't an open architecture, but there was definitely the opportunity to sort of build a proposition. It was the same brand, but it was kind of very it was very separate from AMP. Between sort of the time when we knew each other back then to the time we started working, what was the evolution of the business, the team? How did things change?
Like any large organisation, Stu, organisations evolve. They were responding to regulatory changes, and initially the journey was quite good, like any other licensee. But then, of course, once there was a call for the Royal Commission and some of the issues started coming to the fore, the organisation's requirements did change, and we were impacted like everybody else in the licensee.
Yeah. So what was you've done pricing exercises before we met. I mean, this is not the first time. But when we sort of sat down and we had that conversation and we started talking about pricing, the one sense I got is that you already knew that you needed to do something. Talk to me about sort of how you made that realization. I guess why you hadn't done it previously.
It's pretty funny, Stu. I think we all realise what we need to do, but we need a catalyst, or we need a bit of an impetus to get us to do what's required. I'm an avid reader, as you mentioned at the start. Read IFA magazine, money management, everything else that's going around, and you see what competitors are doing, you see what your peers are doing, and there came a realisation that we had to start doing something on the pricing side. I did something minor in about 2015, but it wasn't huge. The thing that was important was that I was looking at the zero monthly management accounts that were being pumped out every month, and of course, the figures were indicating a certain story, right? Our revenue was flat, and the profit was coming off. Yeah. And it was like a rabbit in the headlight. We had to do something. What do we do? And clearly, we had to start increasing our prices. Now, it was easy for new clients coming in the door.
Yeah.
Price accordingly. But then you had this huge legacy book you had to do something with. And if you think about it, we've got a lot of clients who are in retirement, drawing down their capital. And of course, if it's a fee based on funds under advice, then the fee line is pretty much coming down.
Yeah. Can I share the comment? Because it was a weird conversation, and it's an interesting one. How often certain businesses have exactly the same profit gap. And I remember we had this conversation. And for anybody who's done this, you'll know that when you generally do a pricing model, you run through it, and there's a point at which you kind of spit out a number. And then you spend a bit of time kind of playing with it and doubting it and pushing it and prodding it and can we do this? And then you reach a point where you go, oh, okay, that's obviously what I need to charge. Otherwise, I need to change my business. And usually you take that model and you use an analysis tool and you put all your clients what they're paying, and then you go through a process, and at the end it spits out a number. And then it basically produces you a number that said, this is what you're giving away each year. And I think it's a fantastic thing to put up. But for you guys, it wasn't an insignificant number, right? And it also explained why one of the things that was happening is you guys were working really, really hard.
Yeah, but it was a six-figure number, as you said in the Masterclass information that was sent out, Stu. So, I mean, you couldn't walk away from it. It was large, it was real, and it wasn't getting any better. I mean, one of the strategies we used to try and cover that gap was to actually put more clients on. But then that became harder because the compliance regime became extremely tough, and putting on more clients wasn't really the answer, because you had more people to service, and under the regulations, you had to make sure that, under your annual servicing, that you provided all the services you committed to in the SOA. And of course, if you missed anything, then you saw what happened in the Royal Commission. The no service issue. So that wasn't really a long-term solution. And a lot of the literature I was reading at the time was saying, the best financial planning firms have got a profit margin of 65%. And, we at that point in time were sort of struggling to get to 30%. And I felt that, why would we be at the bottom end when we need to be best practice and be, like the more successful firms? So that was my driver to look at how we could get our pricing up so we could therefore get our profitability to the level that we needed to get it to, so that we weren't, buying ourselves a job and, to use your words when you first were engaged by us, running a charity.
It's. I think Michael Kitsis actually wrote it, and it was a really good observation. It's like that giving really good quality advice and being a highly profitable business they shouldn't be mutually exclusive. In actual fact, they're actually the same, both two sides of the same coin. Because I think we spoke about this, and your background in business, with businesses, or see that one of the major reasons why businesses often go down the wrong route or do the wrong thing or get into trouble is because they're under financial pressure. And if you don't have time to provide the advice to service the clients because your pricing model is not right, then suddenly you've got this kind of downward spiral, the slow death. I wanted to ask, because I remember we did the pricing, and sometimes when I do that, there's a period between the models there and the let's start launching it, where people just need to play with the numbers, they need to put them in a spreadsheet, they need to kind of test the waters. You and the team were just like, okay, that's what we're going to do. Tell me, why was that transition so much faster for you than it is for most businesses out there?
Well, the first thing you did, Stu, was set a target of what we had to achieve per quarter. So what you did was you took this fairly large problem and you chunked it down to bite-size dollar amounts, and then you set a time frame on it. So we actually had to, if we were honest about ourselves and we had to justify employing you, we had to start living up to what the requirements were. Otherwise, why waste your time? Why waste our time? We could continue to do what we were doing and not get a different result. So once you set the challenge to us, we all knew we had a problem. We all knew it had to be addressed. It was then a matter of getting on with the job. And one of the first things I did was I went back to when clients came on board and had a look at what the initial fee amount was for them when we did the SOA, 10 years earlier, 15 years earlier, whatever it might have been, and had a look at the fees we were getting now. And a lot of instances that actually fallen. So the first thing I did when we met with the clients, I said back in 2010 when you came on board, these were your fees, and your fees now are minus, whatever the number was. And then I'd say to them, in the last 10 years or however long it was, prices have gone up, haven't they? They've gone up for everyday items, be it petrol, be it electricity, be it gas, be it rates, whatever, right? But funnily enough, our fees to you have actually fallen, or in some cases they've been static for that entire period.
Right.
And then I'd say to them, unfortunately, we've now got to increase our fees to you. And when you put it in that context, a lot of people would concede yes. It's unusual to see fees fall for such a long period of time, given the fact that the work you're doing for us hasn't changed or might have actually even increased.
I want to dive into a little bit more about how you do it, but I think before we kind of do that and get into the conversations and the mindset and the thing that you do really, really well, it's probably worth pointing out that you've been a long time learner on a whole bunch of stuff out there. I mean, MDRT, you speak, a lot of really smart people. Do you want to give people a bit of context as to what you think have been, the most important habits that you've built up in terms of learning how to do this, how to have the conversations, and from who? Because we were talking about this yesterday, and I think it's worth sort of going into that.
Yeah, I mean, Stu, I'm the product of many of my peers who've been generous with their time and their information, and really have seriously wanted to help me whenever I've asked them questions or had problems to resolve. And I found that the $1 Million Roundtable has been a pretty good source of help for me. either getting onto their website and having a look at their podcasts or their videos, information papers, attending their annual meetings, or mixing with the 150 members in Australia. I mean, it's an international organisation based in the US, which has got 90,000 members from 80 countries around the world. But there are some, great advisors here in Australia that I can, contact and run problems past, and who'd be really happy to help me. And a lot of that, I guess, intellectual property I've picked up being a member for the last 10 years. So one of the things I set out to do was to adopt a lot of the MDRT practices in terms of dealing with clients, and into my client servicing, into my client annual meetings and so on. I brought a lot of this methodology that a lot of the advisors around the world through MDRT are using. Very simple concepts like taking clients from complexity to simplicity through the use of the familiar. And what that actually means is in their language, not financial jargon, not advisors speak, but, how they would articulate a problem. So, if someone's retiring, it wasn't, we'll set up an allocated pension to give you an income, but we need to replace your employment income. And therefore we'll give you a solution for that. Simple stuff like that. And by working in that sort of manner, I've been a lot more helpful to my clients. The other thing, for example, MDRT taught me was to get a great network of other allied professionals, people like lawyers and accountants, general insurance brokers, mortgage brokers, property, real estate buyers advocates, and so on. So I've built a network of all of that. So whenever a client or their families had a problem, I've been able to refer great people to them, and they've had a great experience out of that. And what that does, in my opinion, is that it increases their, appreciation of what the office and I do for them. So when the fee increase conversation occurred, it was in the context of that last 10 years of really servicing a heck out of these clients, and therefore they got a huge amount of value, and therefore price was never an issue because they could see the value we delivered. And just an example, a lot of clients have got cash reserves for emergencies. The term deposit rates and the cash bank account rates were coming down for the last 5 to 10 years, and we were always looking for opportunities to try and increase their rates of return. Right now, for example, Macquarie are offering an at-call account 1.1% for 4 months and then 0.95 after that. And I've got clients who've got $100,000, $200,000 that were into bank term deposits that are now moving to this account. And on $100,000, it's $1,000 more. Now, that's purely sending them the link, setting up the account online, and they've got an extra $1,000.
So one thing I want to ask is, obviously you have the same time in the day like everybody else does at the moment, which is generally less than it was about 2 years ago. Are you still investing as much time in the network stuff? Are you still investing as much time in the learning? In which case, how are you prioritizing it?
You're right, Stu. That suffered quite a bit, particularly with the compliance constraints that the licensees had to endure from ASIC, and we've had to spend some time fixing. It has become difficult, but with the really solid base of stuff we've done prior to the current COVID issues and so on, we've been able to still add a lot of value outside the standard financial planning sort of stuff that we do for clients day in, day out.
Okay, so let's dive into the transition. You're there, you're going, okay, we're going to do it. What were the first few conversations like? Did it evolve in the way you did it, or was it the same from day one?
One of the things MDRT has taught me is that if you look at the best actors around the world, they never turn up on stage or in front of the camera and start ad-libbing. They always practice their lines.
Okay.
So that's one of the things we did. As soon as you said Daryl, you need to get X dollars in an X period of time from your clients.
Yeah.
Immediately I started to turn to what would the conversation look like? How would I position it?
Okay.
What would I say? What would happen if the clients didn't react well? And certainly in the early days, I had a bit of pushback, which is to be expected. And then how would I deal with that pushback? And
so when you practice, like, what do you do? Are you in the shower? Is it in your head? Are you in front of the mirror?
Yeah, pretty much in my head.
Okay.
So I would work through a process. When do I bring it into the conversation? So, for example, it's always at annual review time. A few people I did call up because it was outside the review period.
Okay.
But I'd work through my normal review process.
Yeah.
I'd then make sure the clients were happy. I'd make sure there weren't any problems we hadn't actually addressed. Put all that to bed.
Yeah.
Once I knew that there weren't any other issues to cover,
Yeah.
I'd then move on to the fee conversation. And it was positioning by saying, when you became a client of ours back in 2010, this is the amount of money you were paying us. You're paying us blah now. It's either been a decrease or it's been steady. And as you can appreciate, things have changed. And we are now having to increase your fees from XYZ to ABC.
Okay. And you mentioned you had some pushback.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. One of my biggest clients, one of my longest serving clients, whose FUM had increased by 8 times in 35 years from, just under $1 million to more than 8 million. She'd had a huge amount of value from us in that entire period.
Yeah.
Family members. And I had to make the call because she wasn't coming in for a while. And she was severely underpaying us.
Right.
And I rang her up and had the conversation. And she was taken aback, I guess, by what I had to say, but said, look, send out the information and I'll make the payment. A few weeks went by.
Yep.
It didn't come through. We had additional conversations. She said, look, I'm getting a new debit card. I'll make the payment.
Right.
And then a few weeks went by and I get a letter from her saying that, she's moving on.
Yeah.
To someone who would probably charge less than me.
How did that feel? Because this was relatively early on in the process, wasn't it? Like, I think this would have been that 4th or 5th conversation.
Yeah, within the first few weeks.
Okay. Like, how did it make you feel? You hit, like, that's a roadblock that you don't usually get that, right?
It's tough. It's tough because, you've done a lot of work for them. You've added a lot of value to them. You know them really well. There's never been a problem, never been a complaint. They've been very happy with the work you've done. They've taken up all the recommendations you've given them in that 35-year period.
No, I whenever I lose a client, particularly, I was working with one business for 9 years, and we both knew, we were like, you know what, it's time for you to go on. But when we had the conversation, it didn't matter. Even though it was the right thing, we're like, you need to go and find a new coach. We've been, it cuts because it's almost like losing, it's like losing part of you. So what happened in that situation? Because this is a great story.
Well, I didn't want to go back cap in hand to her and say, look,
good question.
Can we talk? Can we reconsider the fees? I pretty much held my ground. You and I had a conversation, and on one of your sessions, some of your other clients jumped in and gave me their view on what we should or shouldn't do. And then I was prepared to get the letter from the client saying, Billy Bloggs has now been appointed as my new advisor. Please work with him or her and, move the money across. That letter never came. And the longer it went on, the more I thought that the client had gone out and seen the alternative, and the alternative had a look at her situation and were not going anywhere near her current pricing or even the new pricing that I was suggesting the client move to, because of the complexity of the situation and the amount of money at stake. And in the end, I had a letter about 3 months after that initial call saying, Daryl, I've reconsidered, would you mind taking me back as a client? And I contacted her immediately, said to her I'd got her letter. I didn't talk about, what her experience was with other people, if she'd been to see other people. And I said, welcome back as a client, and we're looking forward to working with you going forward. And then, of course, what was ironic was I get a letter yesterday apologising and saying she was pretty stupid for even thinking of leaving me, given all the work we've done for her and her family for many decades, and she's really apologetic for having done what she did.
It's interesting because I remember having that conversation with you. I know I feel the same way, and I think we had a conversation, and you'd already made a decision, and we said you're going to roll out the red carpet, aren't you, Daryl? And she said, yeah, I'm going to roll out the red carpet, and it was just this idea that people remember how it starts and people remember how it ends, and if you do a really good job at the end, and you and I kind of had a sense that there were other people involved in the decision-making process, but we also knew that when she went out there and engaged other advisors, she was going to have to pay more to come on board. And this is a key thing, and I probably want to just raise this. If a client's making a decision to disengage with you, it's not a decision about what they're going to gain that you should argue. It's always about what they're going to lose. And I think the realization is that when she actually looked around, she realized that she was going to lose more from getting a new advisor than she would ever gain. I think that's the key thing. But rolling out the red carpet, and I think it's a great story. Is there any other? Was that the main pushback, or did you get anybody else who sort of gave you some pushback along the way?
No, I've had a few other people push back. I had one guy who he split his funds. I mean, he doesn't have a lot of money, but he's got more than $1 million, and he split his money amongst two advisors. There's another advisor helping him for half the portfolio.
Oh, wow.
And that's been the case for more than 20 years, and he's happy with that arrangement. And clearly I was being benchmarked against the other advisor.
Yeah.
So he had a number in his head he wasn't really going to go past.
Right.
Which is about $1,400 more than we ended up.
Okay.
So the repricing was from $1,800 a year to $5,400 a year. Pretty good, right? And again, I went through the entire spiel. I justified it. I provided perspective, provided context. But clearly the other advisor had got in there and set a benchmark. Okay. And that's really what I was competing against. So with that background in my head and the fact that he's saving money in retirement and his fund's going to just keep on increasing as it has done for the last 25 years, I pretty much conceded, cut $1,400 off the fee increase, but still more than a doubling of what he was paying, and agreed to run with $4,000 a year at the minute. Okay. With the FUM increasing, our fee is going to keep increasing in the years ahead. But pretty much meeting that doubling requirement or that $2,000 fee increase that we had to bring in for that client, as we had to do with many others as well.
That benchmark thing is a really good point. And I know it sounds like you're still very mindful of the fact that when someone's got something in hand, in their head about what something should cost, there's this anchoring thing going on. What do you do when someone, like we see the research come out, people think advice is $300, and that numbers come from general knowledge about what accountants charge, or what do you do when you've got a client in front of you that is anchored to a number like that? They just think it should be, and it's not logical. What would your strategy be there?
Yeah, so the anchoring for a lot of clients is the initial piece of advice you give them and the fees they sign up for. And then what we're talking about is an increase on that figure, and we were talking on average about $2,000 per client per year was the increase across the entire portfolio. And what I tend to do is I tend to bring that back to something that is relatable, something that's a day-to-day issue for a lot of people. The The other day, a client who's on the top marginal tax rate wanted to be invoiced for his payments rather than have the money deducted from the investments, because within the investments, it's taxed at 15%. They get a 15% tax deduction, whereas in his personal hands, the tax deduction's 47%. So the fee automatically, the government gives him a refund for half of that fee.
Right.
And then, because it's a husband and wife, there's two of them, and there's 365 days of the year.
Yeah.
The fee comes back to $5 per day each, which is about where a cup of coffee is going to head, I think, in the next 12 months.
Do you know what? It's a good strategy, isn't it? I mean, like it works because it's people something familiar to. The other one I think I've heard a lot, and it works really well for those of you who are dealing with accumulators, is to turn around and go, okay, do me a favor. Do you pay for streaming? Yeah, I do. I've got Apple TV. Great. How much do you pay for that? About $80 a month. Cool. All right. Do you have a cleaner? Yeah, they come in at my house every week. Okay. How much is that? $80. Great. And a gym membership. Great. Yeah, I do. I pay $200 for my boot camp, whatever. And if you add those up, your cleaner, it's about $4,000 a year. Your boot camp's coming in about $2,500, and your streaming, well, it's probably coming in at close to around $1,000. So you do the sums on that. That is what, $7,500 a month on sitting on your sofa watching TV, basically sweating and grunting so you can look good, which is not a bad thing, but you get the idea. And someone to keep your house clean. And you kind of go, what's the difference between that and getting your financial stuff together? Well, the answer is those three things there are immediate returns. They're instant gratification. Whereas financial investment in financial advice, or getting it right, that's going to have a 10, 15, 20-year payoff, but that's going to fix everything else. It's a good way to anchor. I've always felt it's a good example.
The other bit of anchoring we do, Stu, is to take them back to when they first engaged us and look at their journey that we map out. I've got a big blue board behind me here, but the one in the next office, which we conduct all our meetings in, is massive. And I actually pretty much map their journey out in the first appointment, in their words. So it's a very simple diagram where I've got dollars on the vertical axis, I've got time on the horizontal axis, and then I split the time up into next 12 months, 12 months, 5 years, 5 years plus, and then I draw a dotted line on the outside, which is their retirement date, expected retirement date. And I put up at the top right-hand corner of the blue board the either the lump sum amount they want to get to or the annual income they want to earn in retirement.
Okay.
Now, on the left-hand axis, the dollar amount is going to be lower than on the top right-hand part of the blue board, right?
Okay.
And then, apart from all of the stuff they want to achieve, such as holidays, such as private school fees, the financial number from the lower left-hand side to the upper right-hand side, and effectively guarantee their retirement for 20, 30 years, prevent them running out of money, or if their assets are actually falling, then make sure that they get all the government benefits to prevent them running out of money before they run out of life.
And you draw that?
I draw that, and I give that to every client, regardless of whether they employ me or not. They get that as a legacy of our meeting. So they've got their map drawn out as at 2021.
Yeah.
I put down the bottom left-hand side of the diagram, all the way through to their retirement age and beyond.
So I'm always wondered, how does the blue thing work? It's not a TV screen, is it?
It's not a TV screen. I've got to use a really thick black texter to contrast on the blue board. I could have had an electronic recording device actually attached to the blue board, but instead what we do is we just take a photo of the stuff on the board, and then we transcribe it onto a hard copy that we store in our CRM and send on to the client via email or hard copy.
So there's a few questions I want to sort of put across. I'm going to put across Tyson's, and I also want to ask you about your superpower before we run out of time. You've got a couple of clients there. One that sort of left and came back, and then you've also got another one that gave you pushback. And there's usually a case where there's, most clients just say, yes, that sounds fine, and move on in the vast majority of cases. But if you think about the clients that did give you pushback, in hindsight, would you have approached it differently?
Probably not, Stu, because that would have meant that I was concerned about the minority rather than happy about the majority. And I guess if 3 people have pushed back, and all 3, by the way, have continued, but we've had 60 pretty much sign up. There's another 60 remaining through to May of next year.
Yep.
And a lot of that's already in train anyway. We've positioned the increase for them, and the paperwork's being signed now. To me, it validates the positioning, it validates the increase, and indicates to me that we aren't really too far out of the market.
I remember us talking, and we said, look, I think you're going to bank most of that profit gap, and you should, because that's it. What essentially that profit gap, you're replacing that with hours and stress and hassle. That's why it's there. I had this conversation just the other day with a business who turned around and said, "Our profit's fine, we're just working too hard." And I was like, "Yeah, that's because you're filling the gap." But I wasn't going to go with this. But then we sort of said, "Look, even if you lose a few clients, you're going to get capacity back, which means you can do more of the things." And I think sometimes what you get out of this is you fill a profit gap, and you also get some time back. And 90% of the time, the clients who say no, there probably wasn't a match there anyway. They weren't quite appreciating what you were doing, or they're on the wrong path. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing, Stu, that you've pointed out is our capacity constraints. You've basically said that we've got capacity for 150 clients ongoing, given our staffing and our structure. And we've got to be mindful of that. So you can't really clog up your system with, too many people at the bottom end. You've got to have that space for the ideal client going forward. You spend a bit of time, obviously, working on the avatars and the ideal clients, and we've got to start attracting them. Yeah, I think it's having the confidence, having the belief, and an external accounting firm has recently come into the licensee to work with other practices around the country. And I sat in on an initial debrief by the Big Four accounting firm on some of their findings and where they're taking the pricing for the other offices around the country. And there were 2 other A&P practices that presented as part of the update, and the numbers were very similar to the numbers that you and I have actually talked about on a per client basis and on a per practice basis.
Look, at the end of the day, you're practicing in a metropolitan area. You're not inefficient, definitely not, but you're doing things a certain comprehensive way. The numbers are going to be relatively similar if you look at certain things. There's a certain barrier that you can't go under. Before we run out of too much time, I want to talk about something that, whilst we started to talk about the pricing, you just suddenly started, and you've done it a few times. You go, well, this is, and you gave an example today. We started working with this client 8 years ago. And at the time they had $1 million, and they came to us for this, and this is what we charged them. And this is the advice we put in place. We fixed this, and now look at where they are now. And this is something you are able to do in a way that you kind of, I wouldn't say you dismissed it, but you've gone, yeah, I can do that. And it's something that when I have conversations with a lot of advisors, they say, I'd love to be able to have a system where I can have a starting point, an end point, and that could be the basis. But you've almost developed it without the technology. So can you tell us a bit about how you do this? Has it always been something you do? Do you track it in the background?
We report to clients on a quarterly to 6 monthly basis in terms of their numbers.
Yep.
And I check the investment reports before they're actually sent out. And it's amazing, Stu. After having done it with the same clients for decades, the numbers start to stick in my head. I've got this uncanny ability to remember these facts and figures. And I've studied accounting, but never worked as an accountant. And I remember cramming for accounting exams and remembering a lot of the balance sheet, profit and loss stuff by just absorbing it like a sponge and just regurgitating it on the exam paper to get me through. So maybe it's just some innate ability that I've got that helps me remember and understand. But it's not all about the numbers. It's about working with them as people, understanding them intimately in terms of their interests, their family, their friends, their activities, their hobbies, and spending some time talking to them about that, not about the numbers. The numbers help them achieve all of that stuff. So the numbers are really important, but I always engage them on a personal basis.
Yeah.
And because I've done that, a lot of these people become friends. I mean, like I had lunch with a client the other day, and I have a lot of lunches with my clients. And I had a client who I contacted yesterday for a review. Unfortunately, his health's not fantastic. He's looking at an end-of-life situation, which is really sad. But, at the end of the discussion, he said, "Look, Daryl, I thank you for everything you've done for me." He said, "I remember my wife and I walking to your office for the first appointment. I just retired at 70, and she was concerned about running out of money. And when we walked out of that appointment, running out of money was not something she was concerned about." Now, unfortunately, she has predeceased him, and their financial situation is similar to what it was when they walked in the door 13 years ago, and financial markets have been really kind in the meantime. But, I mean, here was a guy where Centrelink staffed up. He missed out on the Kevin Rudd payment of $1,000 each back in 2008. I argued with Centrelink, took him to the Social Security Appeals Tribunal, lost the case there, took him to his local member of parliament to try and fight for the $2,000. Not that he needed the money, but it was more in principle. And we ultimately ended up having to walk away because all of that didn't work.
Yeah.
He saw the effort I went to, and I didn't charge him anything more for that. But, he sent me clients. His son is a really successful stockbroker, and his son keeps saying to this client, he said, "Dad, if you came and worked with our firm, our fees are going to be double what Daryl's actually charging you." It's a bargain.
But it's not. It's not about that, really, is it? It's not just the. That's awesome. I want to ask. You got some really good questions coming up. But I want to know where are you at now with the pricing? I think last time we spoke, you said you're about 50% of the way through. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're more than 50%. So effectively, what we've done is we've repriced half the book. There's a lot more in train, obviously, coming up in the lead up to Christmas. We think that by the time we get into January, we're 75% of the way there, and then we'll get the other 25% across the line, by May next year, and we might even head back and look at doing more repricing with the people we've already repriced in the first 6 months of the year.
And in terms of the number, I think that's what your question is, Matt. Did you want to give us either? You don't have to give us a dollar, but percentage-wise, what have you? How's the revenue of the business changed, or even the profit?
Well, the critical thing, Stu, was you said we had to get to that 50% net profit margin, and it's great. It's great to report back to you that we are heading to that number.
That's great.
Which is great, but what it means is that we can afford more resources, we've got more time, and we can bring in a lot of the stuff that you've been, working with us on to improve the client experience, more automation, more time in my day, more time in the day of the staff that are helping me. So that really is the end goal, to become a better practice once our finances are really rock solid. The revenue upkick is certainly a six-figure number.
Yep.
So we are tracking well and truly to that sort of metric.
It's good because I think every business, even if you've been around for a while, if you're mature, everyone's kind of had to take a couple of steps backwards. So in many ways, everybody's back in growth mode, and the most important thing in growth mode, you need that profit to invest in hiring the right people, getting the right software, and you need the time. And you can't do that if you're struggling to sort of deliver what you did before. So you guys are just now, it's been so good to see you just get your head down and crack it. And I think you already had a lot of skill in this space anyway, so it kind of made it a lot easier. Let me just pull out a few of the questions. Matt said, "Can you give a ballpark number?" I'm not sure whether that means ballpark in terms of the conversation that was going on between the AMP practices about what their average number was.
The minimum that seems to be coming through, Stu, and this is publicly available material from IFA and things like that, is that if you're charging $3,300 a year or less, and you're looking to sell your book, you're not going to be paid for anybody at $3,300 a year or less. The minimum benchmark seems to be $4,500 a year per client to provide the full suite of services for clients. So certainly that's been our minimum going forward. But clearly we are now targeting much higher levels of income than that. You've seen the Macquaries and JB Weirs and a lot of the private bank people charging minimum $10,000 plus. What we're doing is we're positioning ourselves for $7,500 plus, and we're getting that easily. Now, it's not happening by chance. It's back to the avatars that you and I set up back in March. It's targeting the right people, dealing with complexity, people who are time poor, and people who would value decent advice to get them from A to B. So really, they're the sorts of people you need to work with.
So they've got a real definite goal in mind, and they need some help to
and you've got a compelling service and advice offer. So it's not just give your money to me and I'll look after you, but it's clearly delineated, identified, detailed, and they can see how you're going to actually take them from here, to use that blue board analogy, and how you're going to achieve it.
So I'm very mindful of the time, and I know some of you may have to go, and if you've got to go, let me know as well, Daryl. But I wanted to give you the opportunity before I've got 3 questions. If you've got time, I want to put them out there.
I've got plenty of time, Stu.
Give me an idea. What's your next phase? Where do you see yourself going? Where do you see the industry going over the next 5 years?
I think the industry direction is pretty apparent. Numbers are falling. New entrants aren't coming through in great numbers. There's going to be further attrition, and there's been hundreds of thousands of clients orphaned because advisors have left or they've been too small to provide ongoing service to. I think the future's bright. I come back to our conversation we had about your IFA forum presentation, where 15% of the population is advised and 85% of the population is unadvised, and people are, I guess, concerned about paying advisors $300 or $500 for initial advice. And I think part of that problem with the $300 or the $500 hurdle and people not wanting to pay that sort of money is they can't understand the value that we're providing them and their families. It's multifaceted. So I spend a lot of time when I see someone dealing in their problems, what's keeping them awake at night, what is it they want gone, is it a debt issue, is it a spending problem, is it uncertainty about retirement, whatever it is. So I dive down in there, because once you dive down and you say, look, given our track record as an office, dealing with people all the way back to 1983 and taking them on that journey, we can solve your problems because we've done it for hundreds of people successfully for you. That gives them confidence. And when they see, the current six-figure number they're at and the six-figure number you're going to take them to, and your fee as a small part of that, it then puts it into context.
100%. They want to know that you can help them get the way they are. They want to know that there's some sort of guarantee that you wouldn't be speaking to them if you didn't think you could help them. You wouldn't be quoting the fee. And secondly, that it's not a black box. And then you're going to show them how to do it. I couldn't agree more. I know a couple of people are going to go. We've got to ask some questions. But if people wanted to connect with you or find out more, other than go to Kogan and buy the book, what would you like people to do?
LinkedIn, get on LinkedIn. There's a lot of advisors that connect with me. I make a lot of comments on LinkedIn, on Advice Matters, on Facebook. There's a group called AZ Advisor that's been commenced by Andrew Melling. Get on there. Just search for me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to help. I'm the product of people like you, Stu, who have helped me get to where I've got to, and a lot of my peers at MDRT. And I'm willing to give back because I think that if people on this call can get some benefit from me, then their clients get the benefit. The advice profession is seen in a better light, and collectively we all take the profession to a better level.
I'm literally just putting together my presentation for the IFA Future Forum next Wednesday, which is in Sydney. If anybody wants to join me, it's a live thing before Christmas. And I reflect on something I wrote 6 years ago in Innovation, but I really believe it's like innovation in this industry is not coming from institutions. They're not going to do it. We're going to do it. And I think when you sit down and you talk to practitioners who are building software, doing things, or they're just going down a certain route, if we can get that conversation going, we're going to see this innovation bubble up underneath. And then that's where the change is going to come from. It's not going to come from industry associations. It's not going to come from institutions. It's an exciting time to be in it. So Anthony's asked a really great question. He's asked two. I'm going to start with the quick one, which is 50% profit. He wants to know, is it GP or NPAT?
That's NPAT.
NPAT, cool. There you go. Is the old service model of gold, silver, bronze, is it invalid? Is it done for?
Yep, I think it is, Stu. And I mean, you turned on that light bulb for me just a few months ago when you said basically there's three types of clients. There's transactional, there's assist, and there's delegate. And that pretty much, like it was sitting there and I hadn't realized it, but that's essentially where the profession's been transformed to. I think the days of, this is how much fun I've got and therefore this is how much I'm going to price is gone. I mean, maybe you might be able to maintain it, but I'm really a big subscriber in terms of what you've articulated.
I mean, even if you look at online, offerings now, they don't even use it. They talk about business, pro, and basic because it's a usage case, it's one of those things. And I think because of what's going, the IFA presentation I gave, there was a comment in there which I said, what are we going to do to target the 85%, which are the others? I've had 3 people reach out. 2 of them are advisors who they're selling their business and they want to start something new. Another one is going in another direction. So I think it's a really interesting space. But I agree with you. I think it's sort of done for. Kim, good question. Any other tips that you can give for selling fees based on value and avoiding having to blame it on the government or legislation or other things? Or alternatively, Daryl, do you think it is a good thing to sort of blame it on the government? What's your advice?
I think it's part of the conversation, the government and regulation. I think people need to be aware of, how much work we're doing under the waterline. So I use the iceberg analogy where, the piece above the waterline hasn't changed, but the portion under the waterline has got massively bigger. And I actually deliberately bring out the files and I point out to the clients, what work we have to do in the file, which doesn't add any value at all, the client's circumstances. But then I switch back to the value and the journey and what we're doing for them. So it's not even servicing, because I mean, that used to be, we've done this work for you, we've spent X number of hours, fixing it up. But it's more, where you are now and where we're going to take you.
Mm.
And even the retirees, people who are not really building wealth, but people who might be drawing on wealth or people who might be maintaining wealth. It's all about their future, the aged care needs and maybe looking after kids and grandkids and leaving a legacy, having that conversation. And that piece isn't finished. I mean, that's an ongoing piece. So it's not just, we're looking after the investments and you're fine, you're getting a decent return, but it's still looking ahead for people like that.
I think that's a really key thing, because it used to be this idea that once people got to retirement, they didn't have any more goals. There was nothing else they wanted to do. And I think one of the great books I read about copywriting was Joanna Veeb's Copy Hackers. First page of it, she says, you're not selling a service, not selling a product, not selling a widget, not selling your expertise. You're selling a transformation. Everything on the planet, whether it's cars, clothes, food, it's all about taking someone from a state that they are in to a state that they want to be in. And when people retire, they're still stressed. They're still I don't want to have to worry about it. I want to be able to. So I think that's one of the key things I take away from this, which is if you are going to sell fees based on value, the value is in the transformation. And if you can have that transformation conversation and there's an agreement that the place they want to get to and the place they are now, there's a gap between the two, and you are the person who can help them fill it with strategies, advice, support, all that sort of stuff, then that's where you can help them get to whatever their number is. Yeah.
The other thing I say, Stu, to clients are, just think of the changes that have occurred in Centrelink rules, in superannuation rules, in taxation rules since you've retired. And there's going to be more of these changes going forward. And we've got you through every time there's been a change to ensure you're in the best possible place you can be. I mean, just to give you an example, you saw the APRA comparison rules that came out on the My Super funds back in September. And a lot of our clients are in Asgard, they're in CFS, they're in BT. And these funds were actually named as underperforming funds. So the clients pick up a newspaper and they see BT's being named as an underperforming fund. Now, my clients are in BT. They email me, they call me, and they say, Daryl, my fund's underperforming. What am I going to do? And I'm saying, well, not your fund, a BT fund, but your fund's okay. If it's not, you're going to be getting a letter from BT shortly saying you need to get out.
Right.
They didn't get their letter. So it's putting it in some context, being there for them.
What's the number one thing you think you can do better in order to get the message across to clients that we are adding value as individuals, as an industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think, clients either pay us for delegating or assisting them, or they DIY. And there's a lot of DIY people out there, and they do it, well. There's not one DIY person who I haven't dealt with in my 24 years as an advisor where I haven't been able to make an improvement to their circumstances. However, they haven't actually engaged me. And the reason they haven't engaged me is because there hasn't been a call to action. In other words, yes, there's been an improvement. I could have cut their taxes. I could have improved their rates of return, but it wasn't going to make a big difference in their lives. And they were quite happy doing it themselves. And there are a lot of people who, haven't got a gardener, haven't got a cleaner, eat out at restaurants, but there are other people that choose to do that. So I think what we've got to be cognizant of as a profession is that some people will use our services and others will not, but they might engage with us and get some validation of where they are, and that's it. So I think all we can do is look to continually do what we've done and kept hundreds of our clients happy year in, year out. And that will appeal to a large proportion of the outsourced clients out there who are happy to give you stuff to get done.
I love it. But any final thoughts Daryl, any final thoughts?
Look, I mean, people are sitting on a mountain of value. All they have to do is to articulate it, to deliver it. And the one thing I'd say to people on this webinar is to ask their clients what they've actually valued from using the services of all the people on the webinar. Have a honest conversation with them. They wouldn't be a client, they wouldn't be paying you money if they weren't getting any value. Get that in their words. And the reason that is important is because then you can use these same words when you're engaging with a new prospect, because then you're talking their language, because they're looking for similar things. And then the prospect will get the value because that's what they're looking for.
Love it. That's perfect. I've taken so much from this. I have taken taking complexity to simple using the familiar. That's been a big thing. I think another thing I took from it is just understanding the mechanism behind your fast transition was really key to me. Brian, thanks for a great session. Very well articulated. Daryl, as I had expected. Yeah, that's pretty much what you get when you're speaking to Daryl. Elisa said, I think she took a lot on how to put the value forward. Nobby, it's always about transformation. The cost to get there is secondary. It's important enough. I really do believe that, because if it was always about the price, then everybody would not be spending money on stuff they don't need. Ultimately, wants overrides need every single time. So if you can understand what people want and then sort of park your ability to help them get what's good for them next to it, then you sort of get in the same way. Daryl, thank you so much for this. I've really enjoyed it. I appreciate you sort of giving your time. And everybody else who came along, thank you so much for being part of it. If you have any questions, please do connect with Daryl on LinkedIn. Get in contact. have a bit of a chat. But other than that, got anything planned for the weekend, Daryl?
Yeah, I mean, it's good to have some downtime and spend time with my dog and going for walks. And it was my son's first game of cricket on Saturday, but with all the rain in Melbourne, I think that's gone out the door. He was going to be playing for the Bentley first as a 19-year-old. That's a pretty good step up, and looks like the weather might have got the better of him. But anyway,
it's the same here. Honestly, it's been bucketing. We got one of those small, pools you put in the backyard, and I think I put it back on Saturday, and it's pretty much filled itself. So we're planning on going down to Canberra. We'll see how it goes. Daryl, thank you so much for the webinar. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to work with you, and I'm really looking forward to 2022 because we've got some work to do on client experience. And on top of that, I really feel that the wind's going to change in the next 12 months. So. Everybody, thank you so much. Enjoy your weekend, whatever you're doing, and I'll speak to you soon. Take care.
Thank you, Stuart.
So I hope you enjoyed that Finnovator with Daryl La'Brooy, and you got a really good sense of not only how passionate Daryl is about, but frankly how good he is at doing it too. Pricing's an interesting one. I often talk about it being a gateway topic, because invariably you start looking at pricing and you're looking at everything from service packages, service proposition, value proposition, new client engagement, and a host other of sort of optimization tactics and strategies you can do in order to just improve the effectiveness and efficiency of what you do. If you're interested in pricing, there is a whole host of resources on our website, including our advisor, our Dairy Advisor Pricing Guide. So head over to ourdairy.com.au, head to the free guides section, and you'll find the pricing guide there, as well as a whole bunch of other stuff. That's it from me. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Finnovator. Of course, if you have any topics you'd like to suggest that we find a great speaker for, or even a speaker, please drop me a line at stuart@ourdairy.com.au. Otherwise, I'll catch up with you soon. Take care.